To talk about optimizing your chess thinking. So there's many chess skills, and optimizing means the greater efficiency. You can move faster. You don't think about things you don't need to, and so forth. So, one thing to optimize is the chess vision. This is your side of the board. In chess, it's important to see around, to see ahead. In general, the more moves a player can see ahead, the stronger they are. But looking around is also important. So the book contains various exercises to help develop your side of the board. And then the book talks about method. So method is something you can apply to every move you play. So I was inspired by C.G.S. Purdy, who's one of the world's greatest chess authors in his day. He wrote a little book called Chess Made Easy. And his method was basically, first of all, you look at the opponent's move, what they've just played. How do you deal with it? Is he threatening anything? How does it change the position? And maybe if he's threatening anything, maybe you can ignore it. And then you talk about, do I have a sound combination? In other words, a strong tactical move. And if not, how can I strengthen my position? How can I improve my position the most? And before you make a move, always check to see if it's not a blunder. And if it is a blunder, you need to go back, look at another move. So I've modified this and added some things to it in the method. So the method is good. It can be applied to pretty much any position except for ones where you have a single legal move. Okay, I've talked about something called static analysis. I've written a whole book on this, the art of static analysis. And it's basically looking around before you look ahead or while you're looking ahead. So it's a skill of looking around, identifying all the elements in a position. Okay, so other things are calculation, evaluation, and so forth. Anyway, we might look at some examples, might be better. Okay, so introduction, define what chess skill is. We've got example position where talk about how the average position when you're not in check is about 40 moves. When you're in check, it's probably more like about 4 moves. This position, white has over 70 legal moves, which is getting close to the likely maximum. There's not many positions where there's more than 80 legal moves. Anyway, most of the time, you're looking at about 30 or 40 or maybe 50 legal moves in your average middle game position. Okay, so it talks about in any position you need to see all your legal moves. So there's ways to scan the board, see what your legal moves are. Okay, I've got some exercises here, fairly basic ones to sharpen up your side of the board and how you look at the board. And then how you can chunk different groups of pieces into different types of groups, like, for example, pawn chains. Okay, and habits like looking all the way to the end of the board. Like here, the white bishop is blocked by a pawn on e4, but look all the way to the end of the board, it has influence all the way to the a8 square, and that leads to the idea of playing pawn to e5. So a good habit is always look always to the end of the board with the line pieces, the bishops, rooks and queens. One thing I've noticed, beginners tend not to do that, or less strong players. They tend to stop looking when the piece is blocked. And then we've got, what else have we got? Okay, so this is a monster chess exercise, which I use for beginners, where a piece takes all the pawns one by one. For slightly stronger players, they can do it without moving the pieces around, just visualising. And for slightly stronger players, it's just doing it blindfold by creating a monster chess puzzle without looking at a board, maybe writing down the pieces, then verifying whether it's actually correct or not. Okay, we have the knight and the 4 pawns puzzle. It's a fantastic little puzzle. I've done a whole video on this, where the knight has to move around the board rank by rank while avoiding capturing the pawns or moving to where a pawn could take a knight. So basically that really sharpens up your skill with the knight. And there's other knight's tools puzzles like a knight against the queen. You need to avoid placing the knight on pre to the queen. One by one, you go to all the squares rank by rank in a kind of zigzag, avoiding any squares that are controlled by the black queen. So you've got various knight tour puzzles. So there's tips for developing your powers of visualization, and one is to look at variations without moving the pieces around. And if you have 2 chess sets, you can play through a game. You can look at a position, look at a variation, and imagine a variation, and then hide the position, maybe without looking at the board, set up the position on another board. It's exercises like that. So there's a whole lot of exercises for developing your basic chess vision. And this is visualizing what happens when you capture, because basically you look at a variation of moves, you need to remember which squares, when you compare the original position with the final position, you compare which squares become empty, which empty squares are occupied by a piece. So that's quite a skill that can be developed. So there's exercises to help with that, easy ones and more difficult ones. And we've got some exercises at the end of visualization, looking ahead moves. Then we've got the method, as I said before, the Purdy method. What is the aim of the opponent's last move? Is he threatening anything? Can it be ignored? 2, do I have a sound combination? Combinations are an older term in chess. These days people probably just say tactics. The combination is basically just a sound tactic, which is a sequence of, or could be one move, but generally more than one move that leads to checkmate, a win of material, perhaps promotion of a pawn, or maybe a draw somehow. Okay, and if not, how can I improve my position? Does this move allow a sound combination? In other words, is it a blunder? If not, you've got to go back and repeat the process. And then there's another issue, that's what do you think about on the opponent's time? There's different options. Sometimes you can not think at all, never give your mind a rest, or you can just look at simple things, positional ideas and so on. Anyway, there's more ideas on that. And with the opponent's last move, you want to see what is he up to. You're trying to get inside their head, and in what ways is the position changed? Okay, so there's various ideas here. Sometimes you have a feeling your opponent's made a mistake, so there's a skill called spotting mistakes. And of course, in a game, you're not looking at a position from scratch. You're building up the previous moves in the game. You've got now what can happen is the opponent can play a completely unexpected move. Oops. Okay, so I've got to get that back to normal. Okay, now that may be because you've overlooked a strong move. but sometimes it just means your opponent's played a weak move. So if the opponent plays an unexpected move, a good idea is to take a bit of care and try and work out what he's up to. But the trap to fall into is you might think, oh, he's played a really good move and I missed something, and then you make a real mistake and you miss the correct response. And there's an example from a game there. And then there's optimizing your static analysis. So this is a good thing to do. You can even do it on your opponent's time, but you can do it on your time as well. So it's basically looking at a position in simple terms, which pieces are attacked, which pieces are defended, what squares are controlled, what's the pawn structure, how safe the kings are, what pieces are pinned, so on and so forth. So you're looking at basically simple elements in the position. So it's a good thing to do before you, in conjunction with looking ahead. The good thing about the pawn structure is you don't need to keep evaluating the pawn structure every move, only if the pawn position changes. That happens if a pawn is captured, makes a capture or moves. Okay, so we've got all static analysis, which is very useful, and got evaluation. So we're judging positions. So okay, so with static analysis, once you've identified all the elements, it can become much easier to put the moves together and see a successful combination. Okay, and calculation's very important in chess. You don't calculate, you're just going to be blundering pieces away and getting checkmated and so on. So it talks about critical moves, special moves. Checks are critical, captures are critical, promotion, threatening moves. So these are all forcing moves. Got variations, which is a sequence of moves. Variations can branch into sub-variations. And we've got the skill of looking ahead. So I give a sample position where if you look ahead one move, doesn't look very good. If you look ahead two, looks pretty reasonable. And look ahead three, maybe not so good. So the deeper you see, the more you understand the position, the more likely you are to play a good move. Okay, it's a bit like the old joke where one boy says to the other, well, there's this guy and he jumped out of a plane, and the other boy says, that's bad. The first boy says, but he had a parachute on, and the boy says, that's good. Then the first boy says, but the parachute didn't open. The second boy says, that's bad. The first boy said, but there was a haystack below him. And the second boy said, that's good. And the first boy says, but there was a pitchfork in the haystack. And the second boy says, that's bad. And the first boy says, but he missed the pitchfork. The second boy says, that's bad. The first boy said, but he missed the haystack. It's a bit like that with chess variations. Sometimes it looks good for one side. You look a bit deeper, it looks better for the other side, and so forth. But the key thing is, when you stop analysing, there's a whole section on that. So we've got candidate moves. You don't want to not look at enough moves, but you don't want to look ahead too deeply either. Got candidate moves. How do you pick your candidate moves? You've got your search tree, your variations, different types of trees. You've got a thing called the principal variation. It's a term in computer chess, but it basically means the best line of play for both sides, which is based on current information. So a good thing to do is, how do we make the tree smaller? Well, one way is to look at the moves in important orders. But okay, so evaluation. Anyway, we've got some more on that later on. But evaluation is judging your position. If a variations end in checkmate, that's all very well, but most of the time it won't be. So there's different ways to evaluate a position. You can take material into account, piece safety, pawn structure, and so forth. So at the end of the variation, variation might lead to mate, so that's pretty clear cut. Or it might end in perpetual check, which is well and good if you're in a bad position. Okay, but sometimes the variation gets too deep and it's taking up too much time on the clock. So an experienced player will just say, oh, this is a mating attack. The king's in such a bad position that I'm confident I will checkmate. So they just stop analysing and assess it as a mating attack without looking all the way to mate. So the more positions you can evaluate as a winning position without having to calculate all the way to the end, the better, the more efficient. So sometimes if you know lots of endgame positions, you can assess a position as drawn or won or lost, depending on your endgame knowledge. Sometimes you have positions where you know it's a draw at worst, so and you've got nothing better than that. Got nothing to lose by going into it. So there's ways to evaluate a position as lost. No point in looking ahead any further if you might have something better. Got unclear positions. Okay, so there's all kinds of examples of when to stop looking ahead. Other cases include you might end up with the same position you reach from a different move order, for example, or if every move except for one loses, you may as well just play the move that doesn't lose straight away. Okay, so got lots more ideas here. So I've got lots of examples, some actual games with variations and analysis, and lots of little shortcuts. So sometimes you can tell one move's better than the other without having to analyse. They do much the same thing, but one move might be a bit quicker. And you can reject moves for all sorts of reasons. One difference between masters and weaker players is the masters will reject moves likely to be weak quicker and spend more time looking at promising moves that the weaker players sometimes miss or don't look at enough. And we have reasons for rejecting moves, exchanges, and then positional play. So this is manoeuvring in quiet positions and making positional judgments. So we talk about pawn moves and the effects of moving different types of pieces. Good principles chess is put your pieces on good squares, but what is a good square? Got planning. Planning is basically what you do in a quiet position and what you could do if you had several moves in a row that your opponent can't stop. So planning is important. And then talk about optimising your move checking. So this is the final phase. So basically we work through the phases that you use when you apply a method to choosing a move. So this is the final phase. So making sure the move you intend to play is not an oversight or some kind of blunder. And then there's also what you do on your opponent's time. So there's a few ideas here. Depends on things like how much time is left on the clocks and so forth. And then you've got optimising your openings. So you've got book openings, you've got what happens when you're out of book. There's things like transpositions and following opening principles. And then you've got endgames. We've got some principles in endgames to help you optimise your endgame play. And we've got concentration. Concentration in chess is really important. Not to be distracted by things that are happening off the board, like noisy fans or spectators talking about the game, or just a sec.
We're back.
Oh, that's quick.
Yeah.
I thought you were the